It's 6 p.m. We will begin the PIC. Good evening and welcome. This is the second public information session to discuss the Oak Park Road Extension environmental assessment, and one that we're pleased to provide tonight in a live virtual format. This information session is being streamed live and is being recorded and can be watched on the City of Brantford's YouTube page live now or any time following tonight's meeting. Tonight's agenda is as follows. We would like to give a quick team introduction followed by some housekeeping items for tonight's information session. We will have a presentation by the Parsons consultant team, which will be followed by a question and answer period. And lastly, to end the night, we will be providing information on how you can continue participating in the environmental assessment study. Welcome and thank you to those who have registered to speak today and to those watching. And thank you to everyone who submitted questions and comments to the project page. We will be addressing many of those questions this evening. My name is Mike Abraham, and I am the city's manager of infrastructure planning within the Public Works Commission. And joining me tonight are fellow staff members, Russ Lukes, Director of Engineering Services, and Sharon Anderson, Supervisor of Asset Management. And our consulting team from Parsons, the project lead is Marco Peranosic. Marco is a senior project manager and a licensed professional engineer for 23 years. Marco has worked on a wide range of projects focusing on the planning, study, design, and construction of transportation facilities with a background that includes municipal class environmental assessments, functional, preliminary, and detailed road, highway, bridge, and transit design, several roundabout projects, and the design of large-scale storm and sanitary projects. Part of Marco's technical team is Andrew Overa. Andrew is a registered professional planner and has a wide range of expertise in environmental assessments, functional and detailed design, complete streets, and other master planning assessments across Ontario. And lastly, we have Louis Orantes, who is part of the project's advisory committee. This committee is a small group of specialists with expertise in design, traffic engineering, and environmental planning. Louis is an environmental professional specializing in environmental management and natural resource management. Now, before we begin, I would like to outline some housekeeping items to keep this public information session running smoothly. We ask that you leave your microphone on mute until you are invited to speak. We ask that you turn off your camera and keep the camera off until you are speaking. We will call upon those with raised hands in the order that they were raised. Please do lower your hand when you are done speaking. There will be an opportunity for questions and comments. However, we respectfully ask you to keep your questions and comments brief and respectful. We may intervene if any of you get off topic and reserve the right to remove individuals from this forum. The purpose of this information session tonight is to present a project update and seek feedback on the Oak Park Road Extension Class EA. Tonight, we will present the detailed evaluation of alternative solutions, the recommended alternative solutions, and discuss the next steps in the EA study. I'll now turn it over to Marco and his team.
All right. I'm assuming everyone can see my screen. Can everyone see that screen?
No, we cannot.
Still in the gallery view.
I'll make you the host, Marco.
Let me go back. I'm not a host.
Okay, try again, Marco.
Yeah. Okay, share screen. Can I see two boards? Share. All right.
Now we can see it.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Second Public Information Center for the Oak Park Road Extension Municipal Class Environmental Assessment Study. Continue on. An overview of the study. The EA study is exploring the extension of Oak Park Road between Hardy Road in the north and Coburn Street West at the southern limits. The EA study builds on several preceding studies that include a study done in 1981, the Brantford Corridor Study, the City of Brantford's 2014 Transportation Master Plan Update, the 2019 Oak Park Road Feasibility Study, and the City of Brantford's 2020 Transportation Master Plan Update. This environmental assessment study will assess and confirm the need and justification for an extension of Oak Park Road, identify and evaluate alternative solutions and design concepts, and finally develop a preliminary design and identify mitigation measures for future stages of design work. The purpose of tonight's Public Information Center is to provide the public with a detailed evaluation of alternative solutions, our recommended alternative solution, outline some of the preliminary mitigation measures that will be considered in phase 3 of the environmental assessment process, and finally outline the next steps in the EA study. And our next Public Information Center, PIC number 3, will present the alternative design concepts for the preferred solution, and at that time, a more detailed inventory of the natural, cultural, economic, and environmental impacts. So the project study area is as shown on the screen in the graphic. The study area for the environmental assessment includes Oak Park Road between Kramer's Way and Hardy Road intersection, and then extending south to Coburn Street West. For purposes of traffic analysis, we've extended the study limits up to the 403 interchange with Oak Park Road. The study area includes the existing protected corridor established after the 1981 Brantford Corridor Study, and will consider natural environment features, including the Brant Conservation Area and features such as the Grand River. And as well, the transportation analysis for this study will review traffic operations on Oak Park Road and at key locations, including Highway 403, Hardy Road, Oak Hill Drive, and Coburn Street West. In this slide, we're showing some of the key features along the Oak Park Road corridor. North of the river, there's several areas currently under development. There's the existing Gordon Glades Bridge crossing of the Grand River along with the connecting trail system. And there is the Brant Conservation Area to the east of the corridor. Moving further south, the road passes adjacent to the Oak Hill Cemetery, both the existing and future land uses, and it continues on south to Coburn Street West. In terms of the municipal class environmental assessment process, the MCA is an assessment process that was designed to ensure that cities that are carrying out municipal class environmental assessments are in compliance with the Ontario Environmental Assessment Act. There are various phases of each study. Phase 1 being when you identify the problem and opportunity associated with any study. Phase 2, which we're coming to the conclusion of, is the development of alternative solutions and an inventory of natural, cultural, and economic environments, and evaluation of those solutions, and then a selection of the preferred solution. Midway through phase 2, we went to the public at the end of November 2020 and asked for their input and feedback with regards to alternative solutions that had been developed to that point. In terms of consultation, the City of Brantford intends to host 4 public information centers to provide ample opportunity for the public to review and comment during project milestones. We are currently in the midst of Public Information Center number 2, where we will go through a detailed evaluation of the alternative solutions and outline our recommended alternative solution and then the next steps in the project. Worth noting is the engagement with Indigenous communities. The City of Brantford is committed to working collaboratively with Indigenous communities, including the 6 nations of the Grand River and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and ensuring that their input and perspectives are brought into the study and the evaluation of alternatives and the development of mitigation measures and design concepts. After the first Public Information Center that was held on November 27th, 2020, we received over 120 email comments. Frequently, A response was prepared to frequently asked questions, and that was posted to the city's website on December 18th, 2020. Of the over 120 email comments that we received to date, we can categorize them into general comments and questions regarding alternative solutions, and in environmental concerns. With regards to general comments, questions included things like what has been the extent of engagement and consultation with Indigenous communities? What is the cost of the project? What impact will the project have on property values and taxes? There were requests for details and more information regarding Alternative 7, the new crossing of the Grand River. And there were several questions about impacts to Oak Hill Cemetery, abutting properties, cultural heritage, and archaeological sites. With regards to alternative solutions, we had questions about the methodology that was used to select the preferred alternative solutions. What were the travel times saved in Alternative 7? Comments regarding the evaluation criteria and suggestions for other potential solutions. Was there a consideration of extending Oak Park Road to Shellard Lane? And then multiple requests that Alternative 2 and 6 be considered, 2 through 6, sorry, be considered as a single solution. With regards to the environmental concerns and questions we had, will there be increase of noise, air, light, and vibration impacts? What impacts would there be to drinking water supply, if any? What impacts would there be to the Tufa Mounds, Anstey, Perch Fens, and Davisville Swamp, provincially significant wetland? There were concerns expressed over sustainability and climate change, and concerns expressed over impacts to wildlife, wildlife habitats, trees, and migratory birds. I want to note that the Oak Hill Cemetery will be discussed in a little bit more detail further in this presentation. So as part of phase 1 of any municipal class environmental assessment process, the project team develops a problem and opportunity statement, which acts as a mission statement of sorts to clarify the problem that we are trying to solve and the opportunities that are available for us to review. The following problem opportunity statement was developed by the project team. The City of Brantford's Transportation Master Plan update identifies alternatives to accommodate long-term population and employment growth in the city, including the Oak Park Road Extension Corridor. Traffic volumes generated by future growth in the City of Brantford to 2041 will cause an increase in traffic congestion in the downtown core and other roads in the city. Opportunities exist to accommodate this growth in the City of Brantford through the exploration of a range of alternatives for the study area. These include enhancement of the City of Brantford's transportation system, including regional and local movement of people and goods, addressing future travel demand associated with population and employment growth in the city, and providing additional roadway capacity and reducing travel times between West Brantford and Northwest Brantford and the Highway 403. Measures to support all modes of transportation, whether they be vehicular, active transportation, or transit, based on complete streets approach. And finally, consideration of the unique socioeconomic, cultural, and natural environments of the study area. Having concluded the problem and opportunity statement, in phase 2, we developed 7 alternative planning solutions, and 8th was added subsequent to PIC number 1. Going through them in brief, alternative number 1 was do nothing, which is maintaining the existing conditions or the status quo, and no changes to the existing transportation network in that area of the City of Brantford. Alternative 2 is improving transit, active transportation, and transportation demand management, increasing transit operations to increase transit modal share, which means getting more people onto buses, or alternatively, cycling and walking to increase active transportation. Alternative 3 was implementing localized intersection improvements, which finding key intersections throughout the project area and seeing what improvements to those intersections would do in terms of addressing traffic capacity needs. Improving alternative roadways, which would be improving our parallel north-south corridors as alternatives, including Rest Acres Road, Colborne Street West, Brant Avenue, Hardy Road, and Phelps Road. Alternative 5 was a combination of 3 and 4. Alternative 6 was limiting the development of surrounding lands. Alternative 6A was a combination of 3, 4, and 6, which stemmed from multiple comments that we received subsequent to PIC number 1. And finally, alternative 7 was construction of a new roadway crossing of the Grand River. In order to evaluate each of these alternatives, we used 8 evaluation criteria. These evaluation criteria are based on recommendations provided in the Municipal Environmental Assessment Act. These include transportation, land use planning objectives, natural environment, social environment, cultural environment, economic environment, First Nation and Indigenous communities, and other. In terms of the evaluation process then, for each of the alternative planning solutions that were identified, we followed a 5-step process for evaluating each of the alternatives. First was apply the evaluation criteria for each of the 8 categories to each of the alternative solutions and identify the potential effects on the environment. The second step would be identify what reasonable mitigation measures may be available to avoid or minimize potential negative environmental effects for each solution. Thirdly, we identified if there were any net positive or net negative effects on the environment for each of the alternative solutions. And then from there, we identified the relative advantages or disadvantages for each solution based on the net environmental effects and assessed each alternative solution's ability to address the problem and opportunity statement. And finally, we identified the preferred planning solution based on steps 1 through 4. Symbols were developed to evaluate the alternative planning solution, ranging from empty circles all the way to full. The major flaw at the low end was the least desirable, all the way to a full circle at the full end was the most desirable based on net benefits. We are going to go through a summary of the detailed evaluation of alternative solutions in the following slide. However, a much more detailed evaluation of the alternative solutions can be found on the city's website for review. So now we're going to go through each of the alternative solutions and in brief give you a description of how we scored these things and whether or not they were recommended or not. So the first alternative, as described, was do nothing, which is the status quo scenario. There's no improvements made to the local transportation network. This is not recommended because it would not address the problem and opportunity statement. All directions would be at or above capacity, which could be interpreted as gridlock in 2041, except for the southbound direction in the morning peak period. If you look at the graphic in the lower right-hand corner, you can see that in 2019, current conditions are acceptable. Only in the PM peak do we have some conditions stemming into moderate congestion. But by 2041, if we do nothing, it can be seen, especially in the PM peak hour, that we will be experiencing congestion on all the local transportation network area roads. We also want to discuss a little bit more with everyone the idea that this would not address the objectives of the City of Brantford's official plan, the 2019 growth plan, and the 2020 provincial policy statement. So the City of Brantford's 2020 official plan dictates that long-term corridors shall be maintained to meet the long-term transportation demands of the city. Doing nothing is not consistent with this objective. The 2019 growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe also identifies that the city must manage to provide connectivity among transportation modes for moving peoples and moving goods. Again, we're not consistent if we do nothing. And the 2020 provincial policy statement identifies that the city's responsibility is to meet current and projected needs and as part of a multimodal transportation system, and where possible, provide improved connections with which cross jurisdictional boundaries. And again, it is not doing nothing is not consistent with either any of these 3 objectives. Alternative 2 is improved transit, active transportation, and transportation demand management. All 3 elements of this alternative are aimed at reducing the number of cars overall on the roadway. However, even in and of itself, as a standalone solution, it does not address 2041 traffic demand. The graph in the lower right-hand corner shows you that in 2041, if we do nothing, so as was shown on the previous slides, we will be experiencing congested conditions in Brantford. But in 2041, with the TDM measures, it's only a marginal improvement. It will not draw enough cars off of the roadway to make a dent in terms of requirements for traffic, local transportation network needs. Increased transit service would operate using the existing transportation system, which would still experience congestion due to the population and employment growth. And since vehicular trips are forecast to make up 73.8% of morning peak hour or peak period trips in 2041, there would be minimal improvement as a result of improved transit service extension. Just continue on. Alternative 3 is implement localized intersection improvements. In the graphic, we've identified those key intersections where we assessed their impact. If we made capacity improvements, what would they do to the local transportation network? This would not address the problem and opportunity statement. It would go some distance to accommodating existing traffic volume in the city, but it would not adequately accommodate future traffic volume or improve capacity of the transportation network in 2041. It would not adequately address the existing provincial and local policy objectives for transportation and growth. And the average cost for an improvement to an intersection is roughly $1 million, depending on the extent of the improvements and whether or not there's any environmental or property impacts. Alternative 4 is improvements made to alternative roadways, which include Brant, Colborne Street West, Hardy, Paris, and Rest Acres Road. Again, this is not recommended because it would not address the problem and opportunity statement. While it goes a long distance towards addressing some of the transportation capacity needs for the West Brantford area, the 2020 TMP noted that the transportation capacity of Brant Avenue is strategic and that there's a lack of direct connection between Northwest Brantford and Southwest Brantford. The TMP also identified that a considerable amount of traffic traveling between Northwest and Southwest Brantford is already traveling east to Paris Avenue, traveling at north and then at the 403 cutting back to the west. And 2020 TMP also clarified that Brant Avenue between St. Paul and the Lorne Bridge is part of the Brant Avenue Heritage Conservation District, and any widening of Brant Avenue to provide 5 to 6 lanes, which may be required to add traffic capacity, would have significant property impacts and thereby also possibly impact Heritage Conservation District designated properties. Expanding a little bit more on Alternative 4 and improvements to alternative roadways. Improvements to Rest Acres Road and Colborne Street West is outside of the city's jurisdiction. It's noted in the city's transportation master plan that a high percentage of trips have origins and destinations or start and stop points within Brantford, over 70%. Utilizing Rest Acres Road results in longer travel distances to connect Northwest and Southwest Brantford. A previous traffic sensitivity analysis that was done showed that expansion of Rest Acres Road to 4 lanes between 403 and Colborne Street would not adequately alleviate the capacity deficiencies in the long term. We have confirmed that as part of our current EA, assigning vehicular trips to a widened Rest Acres Road as an alternative to an Oak Park Road extension would still result in congestion on Rest Acres Road by 2041. In the upper right-hand corner, we show a graph showing again the area network with and without a Rest Acres Road improvement. In 2041, exactly the same bar graph that was shown a few slides ago. But in 2041, you can see with a four-lane Rest Acres Road, the improvements are only marginal, and in the PM peak, you're still bordering on a congested condition. And it should be added that widening Rest Acres Road presents its own property, environmental, and cost constraints, such as crossing Whiteman's Creek, and it may require additional enhancement at key locations and intersections and the interchange with the 403. So for Alternative 5, we added 3 and 4. So it's implement localized intersection improvements and improve alternative roadways. Again, this is not recommended because it doesn't fully address the problem and opportunity statement as it was developed in phase 1. Localized intersection improvements do not adequately accommodate future traffic volume, and nor does the improvement to alternative roadways. It would not adequately address existing provincial and local policy objectives for transportation and growth. And it does not sufficiently address future travel demand associated with population and employment growth in the city. And nor does it reduce travel times between West Brantford and Northwest Brantford and Highway 403. Alternative 6 was limiting the development of the surrounding lands. So again, this is not recommended due to inconsistencies with the provincial and local land use planning objectives and its ability to address the problem and opportunity statement. It would not accommodate future traffic volume in the City of Brantford or improve the existing transportation network. It's inconsistent with the 2019 growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe for future land use in the City of Brantford, including growth within designated greenfield areas. And it does not address existing and planned land uses in the city's official plan. And as shown in the graphic in the upper left, you can see the planned developments in the Highway 403 Oak Park Road interchange area, and then the Southwest Brantford area. Alternative 6A was developed subsequent to PIC number 1, where we had a number of comments and questions about adding 2, 3, 4, and 6 together to see if the addition of these alternatives in combination would improve its scoring. It's still not recommended due to inconsistencies with the provincial and local land use planning objectives and its inability to address the problem and opportunity statement. It doesn't adequately accommodate the future traffic volume in the city, nor improve the capacity of the transportation network. And the impacts of 2, 3, 4, and 6 were not exactly additive. So finally, alternative 7 is construction of a new roadway crossing of the Grand River. The project team has recommended this. It best addresses the problem and opportunity statement for addressing travel demand associated with the population and employment growth in the city. It provides additional roadway capacity and reduces travel times between West Brantford and Northwest Brantford and Highway 403. It best accommodates the existing and future traffic volumes in the city and provides has the opportunity to provide new and improved connections to existing and future roads. It supports the development of an active transportation network to connect to residential, institutional, commercial, and industrial areas as per the city's planning policies. It provides facilities that could support expanded transit use in the city with improved connections for buses, but it is expected to result in impacts to lands or bodies of water within the Haldeman Tract and specifically to the Grand River, and would require mitigation of impacts to the natural, social, and cultural environments. So based on the detailed evaluation of alternative solutions, the project team has recommended that alternative 7, the new roadway crossing of the Grand River, be recommended to move into phase 3 of the EA process. Phase 3 is where the preferred alternative solution is taken and alternative design concepts and mitigation measures are developed for that alternative solution. It is also recommended, however, that we incorporate the active transportation, transit, and TDM measures that were put forward as part of alternative 2, since these align with the city's goals for multimodal objectives and for transportation. We're going to run through some of the benefits now and some of the impacts and mitigation measures for the Oak Park Road extension at this stage. So in terms of the selection of alternative 7, a combined approach of alternative 2 and 7 offers greater transportation capacity improvements compared with an infrastructure only scenario. So just doing the Oak Park Road extension. A 2-lane per direction, a 4-lane road extension of Oak Park Road resolves all of the traffic capacity deficiency issues at the screen line level shown in red. So by screen line, we draw 2 crossing east-west lines and we analyze the north-south arterial roads that these that the screen line intersects. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner, we've shown the 2019 do nothing, and we should note that 2019 is the year that the TMP did its traffic analysis, and that's why 2019 is cited as the do nothing, the baseline year. In 2041, if we do nothing, again, the same bar graph from earlier, we would be experiencing severely congested conditions in the PM peak hour. But however, in 2041, with the improvements identified in alternative 2 and alternative 7, we would have significant improvements from the existing traffic conditions. Corridor level conditions are improved, although Paris Road and Brant Avenue corridors still show overcapacity conditions during the afternoon PM peak hour in both directions. So that takes us to the graphic in the bottom right-hand corner. We're again showing the 2019 condition. We're already experiencing congestion in the PM peak hour on Brant Avenue. However, in 2041, if nothing was done, this condition would worsen significantly. In 2041, with an Oak Park Road extension and active transportation demand management measures, there would be significant improvement beyond from the existing conditions. As another benefit, the vehicle hours traveled on a network basis are reduced by approximately 21 to 23% in 2041 horizon year for the West Brant area as compared to doing nothing. When we say vehicle hours traveled are reduced, that is not simply looking at the typical driver from Colburn Street and Oak Park Road headed to the 403. That is on a network basis. Everyone, because of the pull that the Oak Park Road would have on traffic, it would free up additional room and time on local area roadways. Similarly, vehicle kilometers traveled across the local transportation network are expected to be reduced by approximately 4 to 6% in the 2041 year. That equates to over 30,000 kilometers less traveled per day on a typical day. In terms of mitigation measures for the preferred solution, on this slide we've shown the natural environment that the Oak Park Road corridor is adjacent to or abutting. Due to the fragmentation of the wildlife habitat, we would explore further wildlife passages and linkages to minimize the risk of road mortality, particularly where there are naturalized areas on both sides of the corridor. We would examine the use of wildlife exclusion fencing and animal crossing signage to be installed in areas where wetlands and woodlands are present, including areas surrounding identified deer winter congregation areas. And if mid-span piers are required for the new bridge crossing, the large mid-channel island in this corridor could provide an opportunity to place support piers outside of the normally wetted channel of the Grand River and avoid permanent impacts to the riverbed, and would limit the potential for impacts to existing fish habitats. Continuing on with the natural environment impacts, there would be opportunities for the enhancement and preservation of existing natural habitats, which will be identified and included in any recommendations. There would be the need for terrestrial and aquatic habitat offsets for any impacted areas, as well as tree loss compensation once the tree loss is quantified and identified as part of the preliminary design. Climate change impacts will be considered and potentially mitigation and offsets through additional tree plantings, efficient use of materials, and stormwater management features. And then finally, we would identify the use and promotion of existing local plantings with a focus on pollinator species and promoting monarch habitats in open meadow communities. With regards to social and cultural environment, the alternative design concepts will seek to avoid any unintended negative impacts to identified built heritage resources and cultural heritage landscapes, including the Oak Hill Cemetery. In the bottom left-hand corner, we've provided a graphic that shows the service corridor for the Oak Park Road extension was set aside in 1990 and included in the Oak Hill Cemetery Master Plan. There is no existing or proposed plots that are impacted by the corridor, and it's anticipated that the roadway will have no impacts on the Oak Hill Cemetery. Alternative design concepts will make use of the buffer zone and use of landscape berms or noise walls to minimize or mitigate any potential light, noise, or visual impacts that might result from the new roadway. And the MHSTCI criteria for evaluating marine archaeological potential checklist will be considered to determine whether the in-water piers in the Grand River, if needed, are within an area considered to have any marine archaeological potential. There are 117 previously registered archaeological sites located within 1 kilometer of the study area. Parts of the study area, as shown in the graphic below, have been identified as exhibiting archaeological potential and will require a stage 2 assessment, which is test pits and exposures done at strategic locations. This work will be done during phase 3 of the EA process in the summer of 2021, and it will confirm if further or more exhaustive archaeological investigations are required. There are 2 sites within 20 meters and 1 site within the study area that retain cultural heritage value or interest and will require further stage 3 site-specific assessments. Noise analysis for the design alternatives will be undertaken as part of phase 3 of the EA. It's anticipated that for any identified noise impacts, noise mitigation measures will be proposed. For example, the landscape berms that were shown 2 slides ago, or noise walls. Operational vibration is not anticipated to be significant. The reduction in overall vehicle kilometers traveled, as described earlier, over 30,000 kilometers per day in 2041 for the local areas, anticipate to help improve area air quality. And any additional mitigation measures in limited locations may help achieve applicable air quality criteria if they are not already exceeded by existing ambient air quality conditions. Alternative designs will consider the inclusion of active transportation facilities along the new roadway with connections to the existing trails. Impacts to the existing trail system would be offset with replacement in lieu to maintain and enhance the trail system through the natural areas, which have been identified by the public as one of the key features that they want preserved. Impacts to the broader transportation network, including Colborne Street West, will be considered, including the potential for improvements associated with the extension of the Oak Park Road. And then finally, the use of roundabouts at either end of the new roadway will be considered as intersection treatments. So we are coming to the conclusion of phase 2, which is the identification and selection of a preferred alternative solution. From here, we move into phase 3, which is the development of alternative design concepts for the preferred alternative solution. As part of the development of the alternative design concepts, we will go back out and do a more detailed inventory of the natural, cultural, and economic environment in the context of how these alternative design concepts impact any of these environments. Once we've done that, we will go back to the public for PIC number 3 to solicit feedback and input. And then we'll go back and do an evaluation of the alternative design concepts, finally selecting a preferred design, and then bringing that again back to the public for more feedback at PIC number 4. We finish off phase 3 with the development of preliminary design drawings for the preferred design concept. And then from there, it goes into phase 4, which is the filing of the environmental study report and the notice of study completion. So in terms of next steps, following this public information center, the project team will review and address public comments received and consider them in the development of alternative designs. We will complete further detailed inventory of the natural, social, and economic environment. We will hold follow-up meetings with technical advisory committees and project stakeholders. We will continue to develop the alternative design concepts for the preferred solution, and then we will present these alternative designs the ones that are under consideration at Public Information Center number 3. We want to stress that your input is encouraged. We want you to stay connected throughout the environmental assessment process. You can request to be added to the project contact list to receive updates and future public notices. And if you'd like to do so, or provide comments, please do so by April 21st and send them to either the Mike or myself as with the contact information as shown on the screen. And with that, I turn it back over to Mike. Thank you.
Before you get started, Mike, Marco, can I ask you to go up in your right-hand corner and provide the hosting ability back to me?
Oh, sorry.
Yep, the dotted top right-hand corner.
In my picture?
Yep. So you're going to go up to that little blue screen and actually on my
Oh.
photo.
There you go.
Let me put that on. Great. Thank you very much. And thanks for your presentation. Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks, Marco, for presenting. We will now dedicate the remaining time of tonight's information session to answering your questions. So now I hand it over to my colleague Maria to help facilitate the question and answer session portion of the meeting.
Thanks very much, Mike. And thanks to all of you who have joined us this evening. We really appreciate you taking time out of your schedules and making time to join us tonight to provide not only feedback, but to also have an opportunity to ask questions directly of the project team. So we have 15 speakers on our attendee list tonight. And I'm going to ask people to ask their questions in the order that they appear within the attendee list. So we'll get started with our first question from Anne Philpott. So I am going to bring you in. Okay, go ahead, Anne.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My question initially had been why not use Rest Acres Road at a fraction of the cost, but am I unmuted again? It went back.
Yes, you're back.
Okay. I think the cemetery is one issue. And because I've spent time sitting there quietly and I've seen others doing the same thing, there's one woman that I've noticed over in the Muslim section, and she sits with a shawl over her head and a prayer book. And she's right by the trees where you're planning a 4-lane highway going through. The deer, we get deer on our front lawn, the birds, the cyclists, the hikers, everybody is going to be disrupted, disturbed. It's destroying nature, and it sounds like it's your preferred alternative and nobody's listening. That's it.
Thank you, Anne, for the comment. I don't know if Russ wanted to speak to the cemetery at this point.
Hello, it's Russ Lukes, Director of Engineering Services. Thanks, Anne, for your comments. We've had feedback, and we've had a number of comments on the cemetery, and we're very appreciative of those comments, and we understand the concerns that loved ones have regarding the connections to the cemetery. And we want to take back your feedback for that. The transportation corridor in that area does go in the vicinity of the Oak Park Cemetery. It was established several years ago prior to the cemetery being put in place. And I just want to indicate that none of the grave sites that are there now or planned in the future are going to be affected by the corridor, because the master plan for the cemetery actually identified a transportation corridor through that area. And I think that's very important. The other part of it that you mentioned too was about the enjoyment of the cemetery, and we are sensitive to that as well. There's a number of mitigative measures that we'll be looking at, trying to hear your concerns to try and come up with mitigative measures to minimize the impact that it may have on the enjoyment of that cemetery. I think that's key, and that's one of the key reasons why we're having these sessions and future sessions, so we can shape that together.
Thank you, Russ.
Thanks, Russ. We have Sean next. Sean, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Sean Coatman. I was born in Brantford, and I've owned a home in Shellers Lane subdivision in West Brantford for almost 7 years. For the last 18 years, I've been the voice for a beautiful being who cannot speak for herself. Raising my daughter comes with trials I would wish on no one, and moments of joy I cannot begin to explain. I walk, run, and cycle the trails around the river, with and without my girl. It brings me peace, it calms my mind, empowers my soul to reserve for another day of struggle or of joy. I'm not Indigenous, and honestly, I know very little about the Indigenous ways and beliefs, but I do know why the Six Nations consider 6 miles each side of the Grand River sacred land and their home. They have it right. There is a power in nature that surrounds the Grand. We must treasure it, we must respect it, and ensure that the Six Nations people are included in these conversations. So today, I speak for other silent beings, for the gorgeous wind-kissed forest, the flowing river water, the deer that graze blissfully unbothered by the sound of lightly treading feet, the geese that sat down to rest and to feed. We must leave this legacy for the future citizens of Brantford, these yet unborn children without voices, so they too can understand the value of preserving nature, and that they may tread lightly upon the paths and restore their strength for another day. I'm also extremely troubled that the opposing route, the proposed route, will cut through the Oak Park Cemetery, and I view this as a violation of peace and tranquility of that space. I understand the flow of existing traffic is not working well due to the recent growth in the West Brant area and future growth. I live in it and I travel through it daily. There are alternative routes to channel good flow to the 403 without a massive cost to the residents of Brantford and protecting our natural environment all at the same time. At the present time, Shellers Lane is 4 lanes as far west as the rail trail. I propose that Shellers Lane is continued across Pleasant Ridge Road through what is now a cleared field to meet Highway 24 or Rest Acres Road. Rest Acres Road is now 4 lanes north of 403 due to the growth in Paris. These 4 lanes should continue south of the 403 to Shellers Lane Junction. This would eliminate congestion in West Brantford, allow safe and easy flow of traffic to the Highway 403. I've noticed that it is not in any of your plans. I am one of thousands that are strongly opposed to the Oak Park Extension project, and I'm asking you to please seriously consider an alternate plan. I would be happy to discuss this further and welcome ongoing correspondence. Thank you in advance for leaving Brantford's beautiful legacy untouched.
Well, thank you, Sean, for the comments. Like I said, this is being recorded, so it will be documented in the EA study.
Thank you.
John. Next on our list, we have Beth. Beth, go ahead with your question or comment.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Beth.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. I think I just want to thank the speaker prior. I was going to speak a lot to the impact of this natural space on those of us who were born and raised here and respect it so much, but I wanted to get a little bit more into some of the technical components of how this study is being conducted, because I have serious concerns that the environment is being a footnote in the considerations yet again, and I continue to see this happening. In the environmental assessment study, there's 4 statements listed, 3 of which address transportation, and then there's 1 point that groups together cultural, socioeconomic, and environmental considerations as 1 point. And I struggle with why an environmental assessment study doesn't have an individual point addressing the environment as a standalone topic. As we go into the alternatives, anything that doesn't fully address transportation needs are pretty much instantly dismissed. And anything that affects heritage properties are dismissed for costs associated with heritage damage. But yet anything where the environment is significantly impacted is still left on the table. And I'm curious as to why this continues to be okay with all of us. There's no representation from the species that are going to be affected by this. And those of us that frequent the area can tell you this will be devastating to the natural environment there. There's already a lot of displacement going on and a lot of development that's happened around the river. And I just ask, when will enough be enough? There's running out of spaces as to where these species can even go. It's already quite crowded, and this is one of the last serene and quiet places that we have left. When I look through the scoring on pages 52 and 53, in particular of the detailed evaluation, transportation issues that somewhat address policy objectives are scored as a 0. So are those that do not adequately address growth objectives. They're given a 0 in the scoring matrix that you've used. And yet, under the natural environment section, there's literally no way to score a 0. Nothing scores a 0. The lowest score that an issue can get is a 25. Significant changes to natural areas scores a 25 and not a 0. And yet something that only somewhat improves or addresses transportation issues gets a 0. So I'm just concerned that this is a flawed scoring tool. If we want to equally weigh environmental impact, we need to change the way that we're looking at this and the importance and the weight that's given to environmental factors. It's not being treated fairly in the way that I feel that it should be treated. We're already overdeveloping the area. The flooding on the Grand River is already pushing species out of their grazing areas. They have very limited spaces to go in the spring. We keep building housing all around the river, and no one's standing up to say, when is this going to stop? I don't see how we can argue that a 4-lane expressway parallel to a conservation area that goes over the river couldn't be devastating to the environment. And I just lastly would like to question and point out, we're very focused on what the impact of the growth of population is going to be on transportation. But what about the increased usage of the trail system and the increased traffic to our natural areas? There's already been issues in Glen Morris with local residents complaining about traffic around entry points to the trails. With COVID-19, I know I saw like a quadrupling of the amount of people that were enjoying these spaces. It's going to only get more and more crowded, and there's going to be more and more people looking to utilize these spaces as they move to the city. So why not protect them so that those people can enjoy the spaces as well, given that they're already having an impact on the environment by being there and using the trails before a 4-lane roadway is put in. So I would just beg you to reconsider the tools that you're using to evaluate this. I think it's misleading, and that the environment's not being given the weight that it deserves when it's being scored. There should be a way for it to get a 0, if not negative points, if we're going to be killing habitats and species that lived there long before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. I think I'll turn over to Marco to speak to some of the evaluation scores surrounding the environmental impacts.
Yeah, thanks, Beth. I think you had a number of questions in there, and I think one of them was the first one you had is that we're dismissing environmental concerns, which I want to address. We are not. We do quantify the natural environment impacts separately from built cultural heritage, archaeological, socioeconomic. Natural environment impacts has its own category and weighting. We can't be dismissive, if I can talk from a big picture point of view, of any environmental impacts, because we are governed by legislation from the MNRF, the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, the Ministry of Environmental and Conservation and Parks. So we have a lot of legislative requirements to ensure that if we are impacting any natural habitats, that we have demonstrated that we have addressed, we have mitigated or minimized the impacts to the furthest extent possible. So in terms of the scoring, you were contrasting that we are able to give 0 score or major flaw to some of the transportation categories, but we didn't do so with the natural environment. The reason for that is that what we've seen thus far is that the impacts to the natural environment, we believe, are mitigatable, at least to some extent, that we can enhance the habitats, compensate for any losses. We can do that elsewhere. We can improve the area actually for wildlife in terms of enhancing natural areas. But we give a major flaw or a 0 score to some of the transportation categories because there's no identifiable mitigation for what the lack of, say, for example, the land use planning objectives, limiting land use growth in the area. There's no alternative or no mitigation for that. There's no offset. So that's the reason for the scoring. I hope I've explained it. It's not as flawed as you think, but we're not, sorry, you asked a lot of questions. I'm trying to make sure I get them all addressed. So we're not being dismissive of the environmental concerns, and we are not, we are trying to score things based on not only the impacts, but whether or not those impacts are mitigatable, if they can be offset or compensated for. And I think your last question was about the increased use of the trails. We recognize through comments that we've gotten thus far that the trail system is of huge importance to people in this area. And I think there's a lot of opportunities here through the addition of active transportation along the new roadway, but also wherever we've displaced it, we can add in new trails through the natural areas, which has been identified as one of the key features for the area. And there's opportunities to provide additional connections, off-road connections away from the road as part of this project. So I apologize if I missed any of your questions.
Thanks for that, Marco. I think what we'll do is we'll make sure that everyone on the list has an opportunity to ask their question or provide their comments. And then if attendees would like to hopefully stick around, if you have follow-up questions, then we'll address them once everyone's had an opportunity to speak. So next we'll go to Chris Amor. Chris, are you there? We can see you.
How's that? Does that sound better?
Yep, we can see you
Yes.
and hear you. Yep.
Okay, good. Well, thanks very much for the opportunity to speak, and I'm very pleased to see Councillor Utley, Councillor Sless, and Mayor Davis. That's very much appreciated that you've attended this session. I'm one of a number of people who've opposed this project, and I feel like I've done quite a bit of research on it. I've been living in Brantford for 20 years. I live in Homedale, and I use the trail over the Grand River, many, many times, especially in the summertime when we're in prime bicycling season. So I had a couple of comments on process, and then I have a few questions, but I can maybe send some of the questions in writing later if I'm taking up too much time. So I apologize in advance. So first, as far as process, I appreciate that you've done comparison with the combining different elements and the Oak Park Expressway so that we have some comparison between options 2 to 6 and building the roadway. What I think we're missing there, though, is any kind of cost benefit to understand. You know, the thing that strikes me with this project is at $100 million as a starting price, it is one of the most expensive projects I've certainly ever seen in my time in town. I'm not sure how it compares to other major projects like the BSAR and so on, but it is 1/3 of all of the money the city is planning to spend on transportation for a generation. So my concern is we want to see how much would those mitigation strategies from 2 to 6 cost versus that 100 million. If we get to a situation where we have maybe 70% of the benefit, but 50% of the cost, that seems to me to be a big advantage to taxpayers in the city. And I think we really need to kind of get a sense of that cost benefit side of things. So I hope that, did I make myself clear on that? Is that, okay. The other point I want to make too is, of course, we understand that the traffic projections come from the Transportation Master Plan. The Transportation Master Plan derives a population growth figure from places to grow for the provincial government and targets that we've set within the city of 165,000 people for the city of Brantford, as opposed to our current population of something around 100,000. So that would require the city to grow at a rate. I'm sorry, there's some background noise. Okay. Can people still hear me? Okay, fine. So that requires the city to grow at a rate of almost 3 times faster than it has for the previous 20 years, for the next 20 years. That would be great. I have no objection to growth. But my question is, have traffic simulations ever been run at different population growth standards? So for instance, if in 2041, the city is only 120,000 people or 140,000, how does that affect the gridlock predictions for 2041? So I think that's an important element, again, of our cost benefit analysis to understand, okay, we have this goal of reaching 165,000 population. What if we don't quite make it to that? So my next question is a very specific one, as I did research on the history of the region and projects in the area and the building of the pedestrian bridge and so on. So in 1997, the city attempted to employ horizontal drilling to put service lines across the Grand. And that process failed, which is why they ended up building a pedestrian bridge that's there now. It actually carries services over to West Brantford. My understanding from research is that this drilling process hit hard bedrock. There was gypsum contaminated aquifer water that entered the Grand River 3 kilometers ahead of our water supply. So the concern is the geology of the area has been previously identified, particularly in 2012. There was a geoscientist named Daryl Cowell who gave expert testimony in legal challenges around the Hardy Road development, who identified the region as a karst topography. So by karst, it means that there's a flow of groundwater through conduits and groundwater that contains high concentrations of carbonate minerals. My understanding is that under the provincial policy statement of the Planning Act, karst topographies are considered hazardous sites and are supposed to be avoided for development or made non-hazardous through geotechnical means. I'm again quoting from Professor Cowell. Has that been assessed by the project team, and are there outside geological experts going to be brought in? Or were people aware of that history?
Thank you, Chris, for the series of questions. To respond to the cost benefit analysis, that is an excellent question. Oak Park Road would be split with DCs or development charges. We do have a citywide DC study happening this year, so those splits would be determined later. But I do understand the point of doing a cost benefit analysis for this project. The second question regarding the population up to 2041, we would be updating our transportation master plan and our official plan as we go. They are updated every 5 years. That would be the point where we would kind of do our kind of redo the analysis as we go on the population growth. I'm going to let Marco speak to the bridge structure and the ground conditions on your third question.
Yeah. So we are aware of the 1997 project. The existing conditions that precluded the horizontal drilling are not those kinds of conditions that would preclude the construction of a bridge foundation. So we're not proposing any more directional drilling under the river. Directional drilling, our understanding of it is they encountered obstructions. As you mentioned, it was bedrock. It could have been other things. But in fact, if bedrock is that shallow, it actually is good for foundational support for a bridge structure. Right now, we don't see any concerns. We've had a geotechnical assessment of the area done. If this project moves into detailed design, then we will be bringing in more advanced geotechnical engineers to determine what types of foundations and how can you construct it without impacting the aquifer underneath the river, which is possible. It's not, it's done along the Grand River, as a matter of fact. It's not something that's a showstopper for the design or construction of a new bridge.
But it is a potential risk area. Is that fair to say?
It is, and we would, as part of the detailed design, it's not within the scope of this study, but as part of detailed design, there would be an assessment of the construction techniques that would minimize any kind of impact or disturbance to the groundwater system and try to maintain a shallow foundation. They would be relatively shallow foundations spread out. Again, I'm not a structural engineer, so I can't speak to specifics, but there's nothing that we've identified thus far that would say you can't build a new bridge here.
Okay. I do have some further questions, but perhaps I'll submit them in writing and let other people speak.
Maria, you are muted.
Thanks, Mike. Sorry. Thanks, Chris. Elaine, are you there? I see she's there and she has the ability to unmute now. Elaine, can you hear us? Okay, maybe we'll go to the next speaker, Louise.
Hello, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Louise. Go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I would like to say to the last four speakers, whew, boy, you guys, you just about said everything I had to say. However, I will start by saying that I have lived in Brantford my whole life, and I have taken the pandemic to not sit idly by. I've used the trails. I've walked through the fens. I've discovered areas of Brantford that I knew were there, but I didn't know my access was so easy to see our pristine and clean Grand River. I've been very, very upset, to take the words of our provincial government leader today. I'm very upset at the fens that have been destroyed so that we can build multi-million-dollar homes at the end of where the new Oak Park extension would begin. No longer do you hear the loons or the Canada geese that once used that beautiful fen and wetland to come and rest. I have not heard one woodpecker, but I have heard many a hammer since the beginning of 2021. I'm not the Lorax, but please let me speak for the trees, the habitats, the ecosystems, the clean air and the water that this extension has already changed and will only decimate our ability as a city to produce clean air for our new residents that have migrated to the third most desirable city. Please keep our city as it is, work together to find a better option. I invite this council and everyone who's watching and listening to view the original Lorax. It's not a vividly colored Disney version. Please, council, don't be the oncelers. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. This bridge is not making anything better. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Louise. Thanks for your comments and feedback. Thanks very much. I'm going to ask John Anderson. John, are you there? Hi, John. Are you there? There you are. Hi, John. Can you hear us?
Which John?
John Latham.
Yes, that's me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. Excellent presentations. Like many other people, look across, in this case, looking across the Grand River to the site where the bulk of the activity is going to take place, and certainly would prefer not to see any of it happen. Question though is, was there not a consideration given to punching the 4-lane highway straight across as opposed to sweeping down onto the Brant Conservation Park? I realize that it's not Brant City property, but is there another alternative to work with Brant County and Brantford to gain the same effect without getting it close to the trail and close to the Brant Conservation Park? Over.
I'm going to throw it over to Russ Lukes to speak to that question. Oh, sorry, Marco.
Okay. I think the answer is pretty straightforward with regards to the alignment of the corridor. The corridor was set aside subsequent to the 1981 study. It's not ideal, as you describe, in terms of its adjacency to the Brant Conservation Area, although we have done some preliminary measurements and we think that there's at least 200 meters between the roadway and the first and closest campsites. That being said, any other alternative that doesn't use this corridor would imply property impacts. So pushing the road straight through across the river and connecting to Colborne Street West it might be a greenfield solution, but it would impact properties that the city doesn't already have, as opposed to the corridor that's already been set aside. So the corridor and the alignment that's shown makes the most sense in terms of minimizing property impacts as part of this project.
Thanks for your question, John. Is John Anderson able to ask a question or comment? Okay, we'll come back to John Anderson. Mark Dreamack.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Mark. Go ahead.
Thanks to members of council and city staff for the opportunity to ask a couple questions here. I've got three. They're brief. First one I'm directing to our Mayor Davis and city council members. I'm a lifelong resident of Brantford. I've lived in the southwest corridor here for most of my life. And I guess the question I would pose is, do members of council understand that we, the citizens that live in this area, are here because we don't want the features that this road would bring and the devastation to this area that you would see in the north end? The high percentage of traffic, high flow of traffic, and there really is not much in the north end relative to green space as far as the nature trails people are talking to, use of the river. But do we realize the impact that this has to this area for those segment of Brantford citizens that chose to live here for these benefits? The environmental, the river, the Brant Park benefits. Do we realize what this road means to the people that live here and why we chose to live here? I'd like an answer, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Good question. You know, I don't presume anything, and that's why we're doing an environmental assessment, and that's to, you know, hear from the residents. That's why I'm here. Primarily, we're here to listen to what people have to say about this, and that's the, you know, that's the intent of the environmental assessment process. For us, provides a method by which those who have views that they want to express can express them, and that's why I'm here tonight listening.
Just to add on to that, yeah, that is the point of the municipal class EA process, is to, you know, evaluate the impacts of each different alternative and deciding on a preferred solution. The municipal class EA process has a significant public engagement guidelines that we have to follow. So just to kind of repeat myself, it's just that's the point of the EA study, is to document all impacts and feedback from the residents of Brantford. I
don't mind chiming in, Mike. I would echo what the mayor said as far as listening. I'm here to do the same thing. But I would also say to you, I believe it was Mark that asked the question. I'm struggling with the same issues you're struggling with, and that's why I'm here intently listening to what is being presented and how it's being explained by people that understand these things better than I do. I probably am very similar to you in the sense that I don't have a background in these types of things, and it's important for me, at least I feel it's important for me as a member of council, to educate myself as best I can with what is being provided to me by people that do these types of things for a living. And at the end of that process, I think that's when it's my opportunity to not only make up my own mind, but to be influenced by those that are also involved and engaged in this process, and making a decision based on what I've heard from them and based on what I've heard from the professionals, and go from there. And it's not to demean the public, because the public are professionals because they live there. You can't become more professional than living and breathing that every day. So I certainly hold in high regard I guess the thoughts of the public, but I also listen to the experts. And at the end of the day, I think as a member of council, it's incumbent on me to make a decision and fall on one side of the fence or the other. But I guess to clean up why we're here this evening is to hear what you have to say. And to me, that's very important. And I appreciate the fact that you took the time to come, Mark. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mayor. And
Madam Chair, if I may.
oh, sorry, Councillor. Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Through you to Mark. Mark, thank you for your comments. I'm not going to repeat what the Mayor and Councillor Sless have already said, but most of what we're hearing right now is strong opposition against the natural habitat where this particular route is being recommended. What we have heard for many years is the congestion along the Brant Ave route through the Paris Road corridor. And those people need to be heard as well. So all those things will be taken into consideration leading up to when a decision is made one way or the other. I can't say that this is going to be approved at this point. But as we've said, we're listening and to many opinions, and we'll base our decisions on as much professional information as possible and data, as well as the hearts and minds of the people that may be affected. So thank you again for your question. It's appreciated, and all the other questions so far. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. And thank you, Mark, for your question. And I just want to say so far, thank you to all of the speakers. So far, it's been very, very constructive. And we certainly appreciate how much thought has gone into all of the questions and the feedback that you're presenting to us tonight. So thank you very much for that. Next, we're going to go to who has not had an opportunity to speak here. Mary Netchell, are you there? You have to unmute.
Yeah,
yep, there you go.
I'm coming. Thank you.
Thanks.
Some of the councillors on this forum, Councillor Sless and Councillor Utley, know the history of the Northwest Gateway Community Group and the role with the steering committee and looking at the Northwest. So first of all, thank you, Marco, for recognizing the fact that this area is sensitive. It has karst formations, and at the OMB hearing, they talked at length about concerns with building a bridge or anything in this area. So the history is only just starting to get known. In your presentation, you talked about in-water piers. So does this mean you're going to use the existing piers that were put in for the pedestrian bridge? If that's the case, then that would be fine. However, when they went to put the piers in for the pedestrian bridge, they encountered problems. So you can look back through your engineering reports and you'll be able to see those. So that's a big concern. I also note that I have a business in the Clarence Street area. And at one point, this transportation study has gone back over many, many years. One of them was the Oak Park, the other one was Clarence. In looking at the transportation study at the library, I see that there was an option for Murray Street. And then, of course, there was a Glebe property going out that way. So my big concern is reverting business away from the City of Brantford, and now everything is parked in the Oak Park extension. I know a lot of people have moved into Brantford from away. They're probably happy to use one of the options like the one that was noted for Shellard Lane to go and link in with Highway 24. That would be great. But what about the City of Brantford? All the options are going in the Northwest at the Oak Park extension. And as a business owner and other businesses in the downtown and outsiding areas, maybe it's best to try to look at two other options rather than put all your eggs in the one basket with Oak Park. I know the Northwest area quite well. It is an ecotourism spot. The trail system that was developed by Joe Amodio, a previous engineer, and Maureen Sinclair through the Parks and Rec, you know, there's a lot of very, very important features there. So I realize that the city of Brantford's in a bit of a hard spot. Give me a nod if you agree. You agree, don't you? So I'm glad that people are weighing in on this because we all care. And it's important to look at it holistically. I have concerns for the Northwest, different than other people would have, but I strongly suggest you talk to somebody like Daryl Cowell, a geoscientist, who can give you some excellent information about trying to build in that area. And I won't go into the history that I know of it, but thank you for having this presentation and opening it up to the public. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Did you have a specific question, or you just wanted us to hear your feedback?
Well, my one question is to really look through the eyes of a geoscientist to look at what the lands are like there, the failed directional drilling and hitting the aquifer. I sat in today on the Greenbelt consultation team who talked about aquifers and the water that drains down through the aquifers and goes into the river. And of course, this is Brantford's source water protection area. So I look at that, and I also am concerned about putting all your eggs in the one basket in the Northwest, and what about the rest of Brantford? So if that could be addressed.
Sure. Thank you, Mary. Marco, do you want to?
Sorry, which question?
Well, about you are going to follow through and get in touch with the geoscientist who talked about the area?
We may do that. I don't want to commit to that just yet. I'll have to discuss that with city staff. But we've looked through the past studies in the area that were done, not just for the ongoing development, but also for the Gordon Glades Bridge and the sanitary force main project that was started in '97. So we're very aware of the conditions, and construction in a karst topography or above an aquifer is not impossible. And I think I'll just leave it at that for now. I think it would be presumptive, or it'd be too early to go into more specifics about that at the moment.
Well, I agree. And also look at the fact that how high the pedestrian bridge is, and it's as high as that because of the ice buildup.
Right.
So people don't know that.
Ice jamming is being considered as part of the study when we are doing our analysis of the crossing and the hydraulic modeling. So we are taking into consideration ice jamming. We have been in discussions with the GRCA, so we're aware of the issue. I think, sorry, I missed, you had an earlier question about possibly using the existing abutments for the Gordon Glades Bridge.
Well, that was a point you brought up, yeah, about using in-water piers if needed. So are you going to use existing? Is that sufficient?
We don't know at this point. We don't even know, to be perfectly honest, the exact alignment of the bridge and whether or not we're going to impact the Gordon Glades Bridge, or maybe if we can let it, or if it'll be able to stay in place. That said, it's something we would consider, whether or not we can utilize the existing infrastructure that's out there as part of a new bridge. I would suspect not, because of the different loadings and the sizing of the bridge, but it's something we will consider going forward.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mary.
If I could just come in, Mary, it's Russ Lukes. I do remember you. And I did work
that's good.
And I did work with Joe Modio, so
Yes.
I do understand much of their issues out that way. You mentioned something about the bigger picture of the city, and that's very important. I'm glad you brought that up. I've often said that these corridors that we're looking at are really spokes in the whole wheel. That's why we do transportation master plans, and I've been involved in a number of them over the years. And you're absolutely correct. It's not just one roadway that solves all the problems. It's a combination of things. And I think, as Marco pointed out, it's not, the roads are like our last choice. We're looking for all kinds of other methods to try and move people out of their vehicles into other modes of travel, looking at travel demand management, et cetera, those sorts of things. And you mentioned some of the other corridors and connections that have been around for a while, and that's talking about Vetch Memorial Parkway extension that was talked about for some time, and now that option is not in the picture. And that's why we went back and did a master plan to see what are the needs in the city without those connections. And in the much longer term, there may be other pieces that have to come into play. Consistently over the years in all those master plans, this particular corridor has come up as a critical element when the city starts to hit those thresholds. And it's interesting that some of the earlier master plans identified this time frame as being very critical for fitting this roadway in. So this is in the 2020 to 2026 sort of area that we need to start this planning. And that's exactly why we're doing this thing, is to gather that information so we can make an informed decision and identify the mitigative measures. So thanks for pointing out it's part of a bigger picture.
Thank you. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
It's Mary Lou.
Thank you, Mary Lou.
Okay.
Next, Olympia. Is Olympia there?
Okay, can you hear me?
We can, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I want to speak about the value of having the natural space. As you consider an increased population, we should consider the need of recreation and natural space, clean air and clean waters for this population. Is the pollution that Oak Park Road extension would bring to environment acceptable when City Council voted in favor of passing a resolution declaring a climate emergency and imperative climate action? The construction of the road would destroy a much larger area of forest than the finished road would occupy, and the benefit of photosynthesis would be reduced comparing to the present effect of natural habitat. The traffic pollution, emission, gas, and noise would offer to the trail and conservation area users a totally different experience than we have at present. The city water plant would have an increased pollution washed from the traffic and maintenance chemicals, and especially considering that the wind is mostly blowing from west, that the soil is frozen in the cold season and cannot absorb and filter, and also the area sits on clay soils with poor drainage and reduced filtration capacity. The construction of the road would impact negatively wildlife habitat and the diversity offered for Brantford residents. Please focus on developing the Southeast Brantford Eco Place and Eagle Place and the downtown. And please leave the natural area clean for us and for the next generation to use and to enjoy.
Thanks very much for your comments, Olympia. Does anybody on the panel or the project team want to talk a little bit more about considerations around the environment?
Yeah, I would state that a lot of more detailed mitigation measures will be presented during PIC number 3 once we have a further look at those mitigation measures. I don't know, Marco, if you want to speak more to the noise and air pollution mitigation measures.
Yeah, as part of phase 3, as we develop design alternatives or alternatives for the alternative design concepts for the preferred solution, we will do a noise assessment. So what we will do is we'll, in combination with knowing how much traffic we can expect along the road, We will pick key receptors along the site, and we will try to determine what the noise impact would be in terms of decibel. And then from there, if there's an identified impact, like a measurable increase, then we will propose mitigation measures, which described in the presentation. Could be a landscape berms with trees and plantings that will shield a lot of the noise, or it could be noise walls if needed. But it's definitely something that we'll consider as part of phase 3.
Thanks, Marco, and thank you, Olympia, for your feedback. We appreciate it. Thank you. Next, Tamara, are you there? You have to unmute, Tamara.
Hi, sorry. I actually was just participating to listen to the questions. I don't have any questions.
Oh, all right. Thanks very much. Okay, I think everyone has had an opportunity at least to speak once. I'll give John Anderson another opportunity. John, are you there? Okay, perhaps John is just listening as well. So we do have some follow-up questions, and we do have a little more time left. So we'll go back to Beth, who has a follow-up question. Go ahead, Beth.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate that the first time around, I was trying to fit a lot in very quickly. So thank you for listening and trying to address that. I think the point that I was making was missed, though. I'm not saying that the environmental impact is being dismissed. I'm saying it's not being weighted heavily enough. And we keep hearing the word mitigation throughout this entire meeting. I've never once heard conservation. Every time an environmental issue is raised, we talk about how we can work around it or find a new place for these species to go, or here's a solution that we can have in order to try and lessen the impact. And our concern, as those of us speaking on behalf of the environment, is the confidence level in which people speak to these mitigation factors. How do you know? Why are we so sure that this is the best solution? And we're talking in front of a council that declared a climate emergency and supported a ban on plastic straws. And I think we're all just hoping for more than mitigation. And I would argue that you're presenting an environmental impact study. And I feel that it is misleading to the public when the initial recommendation and language is based on a scoring system that does not allow a score of 0 in the environment section, and yet it allows it in every single other section that you've studied. I understand there's going to be further follow-up, but the initial recommendation matters. Some people are only seeing the general report. And so they're putting confidence that this was something where the environment was weighed heavily. And so far today, I've heard a lot about mitigation and not a lot about conservation coming from the panel. And it's just very concerning for me that we're so confident that we can move habitat and species that don't have a voice and can't tell you that this doesn't work for them. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Anne? Go ahead, Anne.
Okay, I just had 2 more thoughts. When we moved to Brantford, we were looking at homes in Ancaster, and everywhere we looked, we could hear noise, and it was the 403. And we said to our real estate agent, can you find us a home in Ancaster that doesn't sound like we're on the 403? And he said, there is no quiet place in Ancaster. So we ended up living here. We live near Kershaver, where there's some beautiful big homes. I don't know how many of you have big homes that are worth $1 million, but they're having a 4-lane highway put through their backyard, basically. And I wanted to go back to one more point. The cemetery I spoke to about the woman that was on one of the benches with her prayer shawl and book by the Muslim cemetery, it's beside the tree line. Your pictures show the road going beside it. No trees are going to keep that quiet, make that place quiet ever again. I've heard people talk about going to burial of a family member and there were deer nearby. That's all going to be gone. Everything's being destroyed. That's all I had to add. Thanks.
Thanks, Anne. Does anybody want to speak to that?
I'll touch on it. I hope you give us a chance to develop some of the design alternatives and demonstrate to you by the next PIC that especially adjacent to Oak Hill Cemetery, there are opportunities to move the roadway to the west of the corridor, away from the existing cemetery, and provide a berm and some kind of visual barrier with plantings and trees that would mitigate the impact. I know the tree line you're talking about. I can practically tell you right now that there would be no impact to the trees. That's right at the edge of the corridor. And if you imagine the corridor is like 26 to 30 meters wide, the roadway ideally is going to go right down the center. But in that case, we probably shift it to the left or to the west a little bit away from the cemetery. So I'm hopeful that when we get to phase 3 and we've developed some of the alternative design concepts through that corridor or through that section of the roadway, you'll be able to see that it's not as dramatic an impact to the cemetery as you might think.
Thanks, Marco. Thanks,
That's
Anne.
all. Okay, thanks.
Next, Louise had another question. Go ahead, Louise. You have to unmute, Louise. Okay, we'll go back to Mark. Mark, are you there?
Yes, I certainly am. Thank you for the opportunity to ask my next 2 questions. I'd like to reference a couple of the slides that Marco had made in his presentation there, and wondering if we could possibly put slides 26 and then 20 back up, please.
I made you a co-host, Marco, so you should be able to share your screen.
Marco, you are muted too.
Okay, so if everyone can hear me, so on slide 26 there, yeah, you had it, Marco.
I'm sorry, yeah, I was, can you see now?
I can't, no.
Am I not sharing my
Just there.
screen?
Yeah, I was just there.
No, you were sharing, but I think you stopped.
Okay, technology is wonderful. All right, there we go. So you said 26, right?
26 to start, yes.
Sorry for the flipping. All right, shoot.
Okay, so with regards to the vehicle hour reduction, I guess 4th point down the slide, so we're talking about 21 to 23% vehicle hour reduction, which ultimately would translate into a number of vehicles by your calculation. I'm not sure what the count is, but you're indicating by 2041. So we're basically looking at this study and this particular road. It may give a benefit in 20 years of reducing, let's say, traffic flow by a rate of less than 25%. Would it be fair to infer that from that slide?
Let me understand your question. So you're wondering if it's only for the next 20 years that we're going to get it, or sorry, at the end of 20 years that we'll get the 21 to 23% reduction in vehicle.
Yeah, I'm saying by investing 100 million, Is that going to be one of the benefits that we're forecasting, that we may see a 21 to 23% only reduction by 2041 in vehicle traffic ultimately?
Yes, it's fair to say that's what we're stating, that based on traffic modeling, when we model the entire West Brant subsection area that's shown on the screen lines, it includes south of Coburn Street at west as well, that on a network basis, the model is showing that because of the added transportation capacity, vehicles will be able to get where they want to go faster. And so there'll be a reduction of 21 to 23% roughly in that area of travel time. Not just, and again, I mentioned in the presentation, not just for talking specifically people who are at the south end at Coburn Street and want to travel to the north end of Oak Park Road, in general for the whole network.
Okay, thank you. Two more questions. Slide 20, please.
Sure. Yep.
Okay, so on slide 20, we're talking to the third point here at the bottom, previous traffic sensitivity analysis. And ultimately, it's the question of the impact of widening Rest Acres Road to 4 lanes all the way through. And I guess I'm very interested here when you look at the benefit. So the information here is conversely saying, if in fact this was a prime consideration, you would have no congestion comparative for the next 20 years. So let's say if we invested, I assume Parsons would have some rough estimate. I'm guessing 10 to 15 million.
No.
To widen the Rest Acres. It'd be much less, would it? Much less?
No, no.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I mean, going back, I think it was Chris asked the question about 50% of the benefit for 50% of the cost. To widen Coburn Street West from basically.
No, I'm not talking about Marco. I'm sorry. Solely Rest Acres Road. So the traffic enters Rest
Solely,
Acres.
you're right, but you got to get traffic to Rest Acres Road, right?
Oh, okay,
So
but it's a 20-year window.
Sorry?
Well, you're saying it's 20 years before the congestion, so you know.
Well,
does it
no,
have
I
to
mean
be widened at the
congestion.
same
So
time?
I'm going. There's already studies done by Brant County and developments along that corridor that have identified that Rest Acres Road has to be widened to 4 lanes in the future, just to deal with their own traffic. That said, I mean, if we're looking at alternatives to the Oak Park Road extension, we have to consider Coburn Street West as also requiring 4 laning. And possibly Rest Acres Road 4 laning is not enough because it's already been identified as needing 4 lanes to deal with Brant County traffic. If we take all of the future growth in this area and push it onto Rest Acres Road, we need 6 lanes. So it's not 50% of the cost of the Oak Park Road extension, because the Oak Park Road, as shown in this graphic right here, is 5.8 kilometers approximately. To improve Coburn Street West to the Rest Acres Road, and then Rest Acres Road up to the 403 interchange is about 9.5 kilometers. If you do just a basic planning level costing of it, it's about $1,500 per lane per meter. You're looking at also like a $100 million project at the end of the day. So it's not any cheaper to reconstruct Rest Acres Road and Coburn Street to address, and then you lose the benefits of reduced travel time and reduced vehicle kilometers traveled. And then going back to the first point here on this, that's outside the city's jurisdiction. Coburn Street West and Rest Acres Road are not City of Brantford roadways. So there's a lot of challenges with looking at Coburn Street West and Rest Acres Road as an alternative to the Oak Park Road extension. Yes, 6 laning those roads would adequately address transportation capacity needs in 2041, but it carries its own costs and impacts. There would be significant property impacts along that corridor. Crossing Whiteman's Creek is a challenge in and of itself. And then if you're pushing that much traffic onto Rest Acres Road, you would definitely be impacting the interchange at the 403, and then the possible redesign of that interchange to accommodate all the extra traffic. So it's not it's not a simple, what I'm trying to describe is Rest Acres Road is not a simple alternative to Oak Park Road.
Marco, why do you compare 6 lanes in your comments to 4 lanes on your slide and the 4
Right.
lanes on the expressway? I'd like to have an apples to apples comparison.
Sure. So the 4-lane road that we've used in our graph is based on other transportation studies. If we do an analysis, so what'll happen, I don't want to get too in the weeds here with regards to transportation modeling, but if we remove all of the future trips, for example, the vehicle trips expected to use Oak Park Road, and we assign them to Coburn Street and Rest Acres Road because that's the preferred alternative, and Brant and Paris are congested and there's no opportunity for improvement along that corridor, then we have to take the 3,800 cars in the peak hour that we think would be on Oak Park Road and translate them to Coburn Street and Rest Acres Road. So the existing studies that are already saying they need a 4-lane Rest Acres Road to deal with their own traffic in Brant County side, we would be adding additional traffic. So it's our thought at this moment, and we haven't done a detailed modeling of it, but it's our thought that 4 lanes may not suffice, and you'd actually be talking about a 6-lane expansion of Rest Acres Road. And again, I have to tread carefully, and I'm sure Mike might want to, Russ might want to jump in here. These are not City of Brantford roadways that we're talking about widening. So I see your point with regards to we're only showing a graphic here with a 4-lane Rest Acres Road, and perhaps it's something we'll go back and see what a 6-laning would do. But you know, there is costs to widening these roads. They're longer and they have significantly more property impacts.
The last question I had, and thank you for your response, is what are I've followed the road, I've driven this road several times coming from Kramer's Way down Hardy Road and following the path away from where this Oak Park extension is going to land. So as I understand, there's no exit point other than Kramer's Way from Southwest Brant here, or ultimately the Oak Park Road 403 entrance. So what are the top 3 uses expected for the vehicles that are traveling this expressway? Where are those vehicles going when they get off at one of those 2 exits?
At Coburn Street and at Hardy?
No, I'm indicating when you follow the BSAR, when you get on here at Coburn Street, you can only get off, correct me if I'm wrong, on the other end at Kramer's Way. And at Kramer's Way, ultimately, you either carry on into the industrial park there, Hershey's, etc., or you could carry on to pick up the 403 interchange there at Oak Park Road.
Right.
So where are the top 3 volumes of vehicles headed when they get off at those exits?
That's I wouldn't be able to give you a good answer. That's something that the transportation master plan would probably tell you better in terms of destinations and origins and destinations outside of West Brantford.
Well, this is why we're building the road. So we don't know this?
Sorry?
We're building the road for an end use that we don't recognize?
No, we do recognize it. So,
where are the vehicles going?
So the Transportation Master Plan has identified that this is, well, I believe the TMP has already identified that over 70% of all trips are within the City of Brantford. So where they go beyond the Oak Park Road, whether they get off at Coburn Street or whether they get off at Kramer, it's the fact that there's needs for there's an identified need for north-south capacity, and Brant and Paris can't provide it any further. And Rest Acres Road is in another jurisdiction and it's further away, and it doesn't address the direct connectivity that would help. So, you know, I don't have an answer for you probably with regards to the top 3 destinations.
Marco, this is the struggle I have. This is the struggle I have. So with this road, then, when you look at where is it headed, there is not a conclusive answer here tonight. It's a $100 million investment that's going to destroy the wildlife and conservation of this area. And I have to express a significant consideration as far as truly If that traffic flows, so if it's car traffic wanting to go to Walmart from the exit at Kramer's Way to King George Road intersection, it's 5 kilometers. So we're going to force all of that traffic up Hardy Road, which, as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, any city staff member, that Hardy Road cannot be widened from the current 2 lanes that it is. The Brantford Golf and Country Club, you basically run through that property, and ultimately you end up at the rail pass there, the Paris Road rail crossing, which the city spent millions on approximately 10 years ago to significantly increase the safety there due to several vehicle accidents at that crossing. So a huge portion of that traffic then may very well be coming up Hardy Road to enter other access points into Brantford then. Is that correct?
I can't say yes or no. I honestly, I'll have to go back and review the transportation master plan in a little bit more depth.
If I could ask that we have the study really reviewed relative to what is the real use and purpose of this road.
So if I could,
public forum.
So if I could jump in, it's Russell Luke's recommend. I think what Mark was pointing out is that the kind of question you're asking is really more of a network wide area that came out of the transportation master plan. And I think he's trying to point out is that I'm trying to follow your question. I think you're asking if this corridor is built, what are the you're asking about the direct link about traffic coming off of 403 onto Oak Park Road and the destinations of that traffic as it exits. Is that what you're asking?
Russell, if anybody gets on from Southwest Brant here,
gets on from Southwest Brant, where are they going?
What's the benefit? Because you can only get on here in Southwest Brant.
Correct.
Travel all the way to Kramer's Way.
Correct.
Who's using the road? What's the benefit? Where are they going?
Right, exactly. So
$100 million question.
Yep, and I think that's what Mark was pointing out. This is what he's done in his analysis, is pointing out that the travel demands going up to that corridor. There's a number of exit purposes actually out within Brantford and beyond Brantford to get to that corridor. There's the attraction in both directions coming from the 403 down into the growth area. So you've got a population growth and as Marco pointed out, number of trips from Brantford going to other locations. The other point that should make is we're also drawing traffic from other roadways in the corridor. So example, this is from the master plan talking about traffic that's using Brant Avenue now for some of those destinations. And you mentioned Hardy Road, which is a good point. It's a 2-lane road with a railway crossing, 2-trail rail crossing that location. And without this connection, there's likely those traffic volumes are going to increase. As traffic volume increases on those particular arterial roads, traffic starts to look for other alternative routes to go through, starts going through other neighborhoods in order to make those trips. So I think that the nuts of what we're trying to talk about here is the growth in the population, the growth in the employment, and the drawing between those two areas. And as you point out, there is other trips that's being taken in the PMP to other areas as well. And those are the kind of items that we're looking at in the broader sense of the transportation master plan. But there's a opportunity here to draw that traffic in from other areas and to do a better distribution of it, to avoid those kind of things that you were talking about, especially at the rail crossing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Russ. Thank you, Mark. We've got time for one more question. So I'm going to ask Olympia, did you want to ask another question or provide another comment?
Yeah. I want to comment more about the pollution that is affecting. The response to my question was about possible noise barrier, but pollution and CO2 gases that nobody is going to walk along a highway where the pollution is blowing. And this project is going to destroy the natural value that we have in Brantford. It is the most beautiful place that we have. It is a place for tranquility that all of us, we are proud to have and to keep it here. And this project that's supposed to reduce some traffic jam that we don't really know what population is going to be, what the rate increase is going to be in 20 years. What was in the last 20 years doesn't mean that it's going to repeat in the next 20 years. And there are other roads and intersections in Brantford to be improved. So I find that should weight much more in the judgment, the chemical pollution and the disturbing of the natural space than it is brought in discussion.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Olympia. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, could I make one comment, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I think it's Marco, you mentioned it earlier about Rest Acres Road and parts of Colborne Road are not our property, not city property, they're county property. And I think in future public meetings like this, we need to be careful that we're not ruffling feathers with our colleagues in the county as if we're have a potential plan for using county land. And that is the furthest thing from the truth. We are, this is within the city. But I think that there were 2 or 3 speakers tonight who thought, well, maybe we can take a route around the county to minimize the effect on the cemetery, and that would those discussions, to my knowledge, have not taken place with the county. So we just need to be careful that we're not giving people false hope about another route. So I just thought I'd mention that, Madam Chair, and if any county councillors are looking in, there was no intent to cause you any discomfort this evening. So thank you.
I do just want to make one point on top of Councillor Utley's comments there. Oak Park Road is DC eligible, so development charge eligible. If we did proceed with Russ Acres, it is an MTO road, and we would have to work in an agreement, and it would not be eligible for development charges that I'm not aware of. So I just wanted to make that point clear.
Thanks for that.
Just chime in 1 sec, Maria.
Thank you. I was on mute there. Thanks for that information.
Just one thing further to what Mike just said. A lot of folks probably watching or participating don't understand what DC charges are and the plus or the minus of having that. If maybe you could just explain what that means, Mark, as opposed to going on their tax bill, how this is paid. If you could just explain that, that'd be appreciated.
The DC charges are to cover any growth.
No, but what are DC charges? People don't know what that means.
They are development charges.
They're levies on new home or new building developments that are.
Yeah, I think what people need to hear is that when development takes place and we're adding more homes out in the Southwest and throughout the city, in order to get a building permit to do that, the developer has to pay the development charge rate to do that. And actually, we just finished dealing with that. In the expansion lands that are coming in, it's about $50,000 a house. So DCs are an extremely important revenue source for the city when we're doing projects of this nature with this type of price tag. So people should be made aware and help them understand, because people don't deal with this stuff every day. We do. So it's a way of allowing the city to develop and build things that are needed for growth that are funded in that manner. And that because we spend $100 million, if that's what it is, and if that's what we end up doing, that isn't going on directly onto their tax bill, and their taxes are going to go sky high because we do that. It's paid by development. Development pays for development, and that's done through these, what you keep referring to as DC charges, which is something that nobody knows what that means. So that's what that means. It's a revenue source to build these types of things to accommodate growth, and it's paid for by growth. So I think that has to be made very clear to people, because there's a misconception that they're going to pay $100 million on their tax bill and they're going, whoa. So I think they have to hear the whole story, Mike, is what I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And I just want to thank all of the speakers tonight. I think all of your questions and comments were very thoughtful and constructive. And there are a lot of ways that you can choose to spend your free time, and choosing to be a part of this meeting and taking the time out to think about, prepare your comments and questions and share them with the project team is very, very much appreciated, and a very, very important part of this process. So I'll turn it back over to Mike just for some closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. I'd like to thank everyone for their questions and comments and feedback. This is an important part of our evaluation process, and as mentioned several times tonight, all this feedback will be taken into serious consideration. Before we adjourn for the night, I just want to notify everyone watching this public information session that you still have 3 weeks till April 21st to submit any questions or comments regarding the topics that have been discussed tonight. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that there are multiple ways. The most convenient way would be through our city's Let's Talk Brantford website, which is letstalkbrantford.ca. Here you will find a link to the Oak Park project and contact information for the project leads, as well as the project emails. You can also mail your comments and questions to the Engineering Services Department at 100 Wellington Square, or you can place your questions or comments in the drop box that we have at the front of City Hall. And just to remind everyone here tonight that this meeting is recorded on YouTube and will be available to watch again. So please visit our YouTube channel at youtube.com user City of Brantford. The next step is for the city staff to compile the questions and comments and feedback that we've heard tonight, and the ones that we received over the next 3 weeks. We have received a lot of correspondence and will respond to all inquiries. On the behalf of myself and my colleagues here at the city and our consultants, thank you for participating tonight and for watching. This information session is now adjourned.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, staff.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.